Hi, this is Jonathan Spero coming to you from my home to talk about health security and as it pertains to employers' return to work policies, making them effective and safe. In my last segment, I talked about the first principle of health security, and that's prevention. Now we're going to talk about the second principle, which is detection. Detection meaning determining whether an employee is currently infected with COVID-19, something that you don't want to happen, but if it does happen, you certainly don't want them at the workplace. Another part of detection is determining if an employee has been infected in the past, because there is some data to suggest that if they have been infected in the past, they may be immune to the infection, and that could be helpful as an employer, and we'll talk about that later. Right now, we're going to look about detecting for infection, right? That's the most important piece. And there's two ways to detect for infection. The first one is by doing temperature checks, and the second one is actually testing the employee with PCR testing for an infection. So this segment today is going to be looking at temperature checks. Now I know a number of employers, thousands of employers actually, are looking into doing temperature checks or already doing temperature checks for their employees that weren't able to work from home. This is effective because the most common symptom of COVID-19 is a fever. So if you can screen for a fever when employees are going to work, then it becomes useful and it's not specific, doesn't mean they actually have COVID-19 infection, but you can screen them for further evaluation with their healthcare professional and not allow them to come to work. Now, is it foolproof? Absolutely not. Early on in these infections, COVID patients are not febrile. In fact, many of them, when they first get infected, are not symptomatic, but it will pick up a lot of people who may be suffering from COVID-19. So how do you do this? Well, there's two ways that you can do this. One is with what are called no contact infrared thermometers, where you can train your staff, have your staff trained, or bring in staff to do these temperature checks at the beginning of a shift. There are no contact, which is nice, and the number of employees that you can get through in 1 hour with one staff member is quite high. You can do one of these temperature checks every 5 to 10 seconds, dependent on how quickly the thermometer that you use is allowed to check temperatures and how well trained your staff is. When you're taking temperatures, you have to identify what is a significant temperature. From a medical standpoint, a fever is a temperature above 100.3 degrees Fahrenheit, 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit or greater. You may decide that you want to be more sensitive and pick a lower temperature to start and as your cutoff for when a fever starts. But I'm just letting you know what the healthcare community defines as a fever. The next thing you need to know about temperature checks is that if someone is found to have a fever, what are you going to do with that person? Of course, you're not going to want them to come to work, but you may want them to get testing and find out if they actually do have COVID, because maybe their fever goes away in a couple days and they come to work, but they still have COVID. That's not a good situation for your workplace to be in. So you need to plan ahead and think about who's going to be doing the testing on these patients that have fevers to determine whether they actually do have COVID or not. Thank you very much for tuning in to Return to Work for Employers. I look forward to talking to you next week more about detection in the workplace. Jonathan Spero with In-House Physicians. Have a good day.